What's up, guys? Max here, back with a brand new episode of the Scuttlebutt Show. And as you can see today, I'm joined by two great guests. Let me real quick say what's up to Jimmy Wen, Andrew, Sam, Chris, Nuggets, Eviana, Ika, Ao, Nixo is here, Eric, Alex, and MC who are already chiming in the chat, and everybody else who's watching who hasn't tuned in yet. And welcome to my two special guests, John Cordle, who you might remember from an episode a couple weeks ago with Rob Sweetman, and Keith Green. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
It's an honor to have you here, John.
Here. Thanks, man.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. It's great to have you here. And we're going to talk about so much stuff today. It's going to be amazing. The title of the episode was The Truth About Beards in the Military, and how it has actually been worse than people realize. I think most people don't even understand the impact. But before we get into all of that, can you introduce yourself real quick, Keith, for everybody who is tuning in who does not know who you are?
My name's Keith Green. Full name is Reuben Keith Green. I retired from the Navy in 1997. I was a surface warfare guy. Before that, I was a Mustang. I was an enlisted guy. Started out in 1975 as a mineman, became a yeoman, and then I was an Equal Opportunity Program Specialist. Then I taught leadership for a while, and then I ran an admin office at an aviation squadron or aviation wing. And then I went to OCS and became a surface warfare guy. I did 3 ships in a row, a steam frigate, an FFG, and a hydrofoil. I was actually on a hydrofoil. Went from there to be an import training officer. Well, actually, I was a safety officer, but I got fleeted up to the import training job, unfortunately, but it turned out to be the best job I ever had. And then I finished out my career as the base telephone officer at NAS Jacksonville, where I had the distinction of getting a Secretary of the Navy performance audit because the Admiral was not happy with it. Turned out great, but it was no fun.
You couldn't get his phones through.
And John, real quick, for anybody tuning in who maybe didn't see you on the last episode, can you give us an introduction on yourself as well?
Thanks. Yeah, John Cordle here. Went to the Naval Academy in 1984. Went surface nuke, so I was on a couple of nuclear cruisers, pre-com a couple of aircraft carriers. Surface warfare officer, commanded 2 ships, Oscar Austin, DDG, and San Jacinto cruiser. And then retired about 2013, and have done some other work for the government since then. Sort of in my my normal off-duty time, looking a lot at things like sleep and circadian watches, like we talked about. So this is a bit of an off-ramp for me. But met Keith a couple years ago, struck up a friendship, and found it to be pretty enlightening. So that's what started the article that ended up, I guess, prompting the discussion here.
That's great. And I what's really great about this is you guys met online, right? You guys first met online. Is that correct?
Yeah. Not on like a dating, site or anything, but LinkedIn.
Later.
Keith's waving his arms. No, it was actually, it was LinkedIn, and I post a bunch of stuff on there, usually sleep related. And, and people comment, and I noticed this gentleman, Mr. Green, commenting, and I commented on some of his stuff, and then somebody came out with sort of a body slam comment, just insulting his point of view. And I remember I think I wrote that person a note and said, just by the way, as soon as I hit send on this, I'm going to block you, but just don't talk to people like that. And so I think Keith came up on the net and said thanks, and then we struck up a friendship, and finally just met here a few weeks ago for the first time, thanks to COVID, down in Jacksonville.
That's awesome. That's so cool. If you guys have any questions on anything during the show, please drop those questions in the chat, and I will forward them on to John or Keith, whoever the question is for. And I just want everyone who's listening in the audience to know that these two gentlemen not only dedicated their lives to service in the military, their professional lives, many years, but also then after the military have continued to try to make the military a better place for future generations, and are continuing to do so. So these are two great Americans right here who we owe an unmeasurable debt of gratitude to for their continued determination and spreading these great and important messages, and continuing to work on behalf of sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines, Guardians, now everybody. So thank you guys very much for everything you do.
Well, thank you.
And if you guys do want to get to know Keith, in and out of his career. He has a book called Black Officer, White Navy, and it's linked in the description of this video, as well as a little bit more into their bios in the description of this video. That Amazon link is out there right now. You guys can go find that. We'll talk about the book and plug it a few more times in the show, but it's linked in the description if you guys want to check that out. I think you should. That'd be great. I'm going to get my copy. And so make sure you guys, if you're interested, check out that book. And let's kind of talk about that a little bit, Keith. If you want to describe what it is that from your career that kind of got us here to this conversation today, like the experiences you had, maybe you can kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Well, I have to start at the beginning. My father was a bosun mate in the Navy. He served on 8 ships, went to Vietnam 4 times.
Wow.
Before that, he was a paratrooper in Korea. He joined the Army at 17. His father died in a VA hospital in 1946 when he was 12. So my father was an only child and wound up in the military, underage, paratrooper, Korea, and then multiple trips to Vietnam. Based on his own experiences, he told me that there was no way he was signing the papers for me to join the Navy. And I said, why? And he said, because the Navy is too racist. And I said, no, Admiral Zumwalt fixed all that. I've been reading about it in the papers, and he's the CNO, so he just sort of gave me that look, you're 17 and you know everything. So I did an in around him and got my mother and stepmother to sign the papers. And it didn't take me very long to figure out that my father was right about certain things. He was also wrong about a lot because the Navy was changing, but any organization that big is slow to change. So I'm a very voracious reader, and I always read anything I can find about minority service experience in the military. And after I retired, about 10 years after I retired, I was still licking my wounds from some things that I had dealt with towards the end of my career and throughout my career. And I said, I can't find this book, so I'm just going to write it. And I started it about 2007 or 8. I got some information from the military, the Navy, DOD about discrimination complaints and other stuff. And I decided I didn't need to write the book after President Obama got elected because it was announced to the world that we were now in a post-racial society. So there was no need for me to write the book. Well, turns out that was also not quite true. So about the run up to the 2016 election, I just dusted off my notes and just started finishing it up. And about a month after the Charlottesville incident, Charlottesville, Virginia, I decided to go ahead and publish the book. I wanted people to understand what the life of a military person was like in terms of being a minority in the military and some of the problems that I and others had to deal with that aren't necessarily common knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important to do. I think we learn a lot more from people discussing their individual experiences than anything else. When you just hear somebody saying, this is what happened to me, this is how it was for me, you can then go, okay, well, you're of course not the only person experiencing these things. I now understand better what those experiences are, because otherwise I just hear things like there is bias, there is prejudice, there is racism, there is sexism. But when I hear somebody's personal story that I can connect with, it goes a lot further to making people understand and empathize and see what can be done maybe to make things better than anything else. So I think that you made a great call by publishing and writing in the first place, which we've been talking about writing a lot in the show recently. But what were some of those experiences?
Well, that covers a lot of ground, but I'll give you the first eye-opening experience I had, and that was in my first day school class. Well, I only had one, but I joined the Navy as a mineman. I was a 4x10 reserve, 4 to 10 months active duty, and then you go to a reserve unit. I took my father partially at his word. I said, okay, well, if I can go in as a mineman and do 4 to 10 months, get some technical training, and then come out and be in the reserves, I can always come back in if it's not as bad as he said it was. So we started our mineman A school class with 28 students. And when we walked into the class, the instructors looked around and said, take a look around. Most of you are not going to be here when this class graduates. This is a hard class, and most of you are not going to graduate. Just letting you know right up front, unless you really put a lot of effort into this, you will not graduate. And true to his word, we graduated 7 out of those 28 people. I graduated number 2 in my class. Yeah, I graduated number 2 in my class. But I began to notice I was treated differently than the rest of the people in the class. I was the only black guy in the class initially, and we had a student roll back from another class. So that wound up making two of us, into that class. But I was the only one that graduated out of that particular class. But anyway, I did very well in the class, but I noticed that on the written exams, I would do extremely well. I was either number 1 or number 2 consistently. But on the practical exams where you had to demonstrate your knowledge of a circuit board or whatever, I would always get C's. I'm making A's in the written exams, but I'm making C's in the practicals. And it made no sense to me because I was the same person, except the only thing that was different was the subjective analysis of the person evaluating. So I realized pretty quickly that there was some bias involved in that. And also during the personnel inspections, I had the best looking uniform, I had the shiniest shoes, I stood the tallest. My father was a bosun mate. I knew how to get ready for an inspection, but I would never receive any kind of complimentary comments. But the guy that happened to be standing right next to me, they would look me up and down and not say anything. And then they'd give him accolades, outstanding for his uniform. And he didn't look as good as I did. One of my classmates finally asked me, said, "Keith, why do you never get any positive comments at the personnel inspection? You look better than all of us." So I just turned the question around and said, "Well, why do you think it is?" And he put his head down, and that was the end of the conversation. So that was how I started my career. At the end of my career, there's a lot of stuff that happened in between, but at the end of my career, I wound up working for a guy. Honestly, I think he was a sociopath, but he was a very difficult person to work with because no matter how well you did or how much you tried to help him, he always looked for some way to put you down or to harm you. For instance, I was the telephone officer. I was running the telephone department and the facilities department, but I didn't have a cell phone. I ordered a cell phone, and when it came in, the comptroller, who was a former enlisted Marine, gave my phone to someone else and said he'd order me one. I was there for 2 years and never had a cell phone running 2 departments, and I'm running the telephone department. There's a lot of stuff that happened in between, but I had great bosses and I had bad bosses. Particularly when I became an officer, it was very important to me to do well. So I made sure that I was outperforming the other people around me to the best of my ability. And one of the things I did was at every opportunity, I had to go up to give the captain something to sign or the XO something that they needed to look at or whatever. I would take the time to ask either one of them, is there something that I'm doing that you don't want me to do? And is there something that I'm not doing that you want me to do? Because I didn't want any surprises when my fit rep came out. And so I was very fortunate in that regard because that worked well for me for 4 consecutive sea tours. And then when I went to shore duty, that's when it all fell apart.
It is interesting how even if, let's say, I'm just going to say some random numbers here, right? Let's say out of 100 people, 98 have no biases and 2 do. That's significantly in the favor of unbiased people, but in the military, it hardly matters if those 2 people are near the top of the chain of command or somehow in between you and success in what you're trying to accomplish. There's so much power based on rank, and in the Navy, rank is based on a lot of times, non-performance based things. So somebody who is maybe not the right person for the job, who's just been around for a while and has done well on the test or has just taken the test enough times, will end up in a position of authority over you completely unchecked in any other way. And then their decisions can impact the careers and progression and well-being of junior sailors and, service members below them. And it can be completely devastating to then many people. So then everyone who has to go through them, as they're the gatekeeper of progress at this point, can stunt all the careers of all of these people that they just choose not to like for whatever reason, if it's racist, sexist, or whatever their bias is one of the main problems with the way that the military does business, as far as, just letting people have so much authority based on rank and rank based on something like performance on an academic test alone. You know, does that make sense?
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah.
Yep. Although, Max, I would submit that you might have your numbers wrong. If you pick any 100 people, I would think you're probably going to find more than 2 that have some kind of bias.
Yeah, most likely. I guess just for the trying to make the point of
no, you're right.
The one wrong person at the wrong point in the chain, as they say, the chain's only as strong as the weakest link. That 1 or 2 wrong people at the wrong points in the chain can affect so many people that it's kind of outrageous. It's kind of crazy, especially an A school instructor, where that's formative for somebody, you know, coming up in the Navy or, you know, whatever, AIT in the Army, whatever it is, and, you know, et cetera, whatever school people are going to in the military, whatever they call it in Space Force, Space Camp or whatever. If that instructor is creating these bottlenecks for success or just turning people off to the military in general, that is going to go with them for the rest of their career. So it really sucks that happened to you in A school.
Well, let me give you the counterpoint to that, or the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm a 20-year veteran. I've got 20 years, 3 ships, and a Desron under my belt. And I go to check into my first shore duty as an officer. You might imagine I was fairly tired after that much sea time and, sea duty. So I go to check into this job, which I could do with one hand tied behind my back. It's probably going to be the easiest job I'd ever had as an officer. And I'm walking down the passageway to go check in. I'd spoken to my sponsor about 30 minutes before. We've been communicating over the telephone and via email. So as I'm walking down the passageway to go check into the admin office, the executive officer comes running up to me and introduces himself and says, there's been a change in plans. He says, you're going to take over the TQL program for the command. You're going to be the TQL coordinator. And I said, XO, I said, I'm confused. I just spoke to my sponsor about 30 minutes ago. I said, why the change? I wasn't aware that there was a change in the works. And he wouldn't look at me in the face. So he says, well, the captain thinks you'd be a better fit for this job. So he walks me back to this space that I'd already walked past. And I look in and there's this closet with a bunch of boxes on the floor. No desk, no nothing. It was basically just a closet that had been converted into an office. And I knew about the TQL program because I'd been on the executive steering committee at my last command, and we'd done some fairly innovative things. So when I finally met the captain a few minutes later, he really didn't want to look at me either. So after that was done, I went to the admin office and pulled up the captain's biography and saw that he was born, raised, and educated in the great state of Alabama, class of 1971. And that gave me some idea what might be going on there, because the only thing that had changed was he had seen the color of my skin. And he decided just based on that I couldn't do the job that I'd been ordered in there to do. A couple weeks later, I still hadn't had my welcome aboard interview with the captain, but he sent me to Puerto Rico to do an investigation of a IG complaint. When I came back, he finally decides to sit down and talk to me. And as I'm sitting there, he's giving me his, command philosophy and such. And then he asked me, Keith, have you thought about going to department head school? I was stunned by the question, so I said, excuse me. And he said, have you thought about going to department head school? So that's when I explained to him that I'd gone to department head school years ago. I said, Captain, this is my 4th department head tour. I was chief engineer on a frigate. I was XO on a hydrofoil. I was the import training officer at Desron 8 at Mayport. So the only reason I'm not in the XO float pipeline now is because I'm so junior in the pipeline, I can't get ahead of the logjam. So he was stunned by all of this. And I saw his mouth drop open. And I said, didn't you read my record? And he said, no. So he was basing everything he thought about me strictly on the color of my skin. After that, he decides he's going to give me the job I'd been ordered in there to take, which is the telephone office. He announces this at a staff meeting a few days later. He said, I'm going to use this superstar surface warfare officer that I've just been assigned to run the telephone office, which was what I was ordered in there to take. And then he says, I'm also going to assign him to run the facilities department. So now that he understands my background, he's going to give me the job I was ordered in there to take, plus another complete department head job, but I still only get one paycheck.
That's one of the best parts about the military. it borders on unbelievable that people could be so forward with that kind of behavior. And I'm not saying I'm not saying the credibility of the story is somehow unbelievable, but it's just like, it's one of those things that emphasizes how I never would have experienced anything like that. And I don't have any problem admitting that. You know, I would have never experienced that same kind of discrimination. And so the reason I said that is because, you know, I openly listen to stories like that, and I'm like, and I have no doubt that your story is exactly what happened. But then for me to hear that, I'm like, I can't. What feels incredible to me is that people are like that, as if they're somehow confident that they're doing nothing wrong. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing could just happen to you. You know, I describe it as a middle finger in your face moment, which I'm sure you've had many of in your career, and that's what, you know, you've written about those experiences in the book. And in front of everyone, middle finger in your face, as if it's just business as usual. It is unreal. And that's one of the experiences that you had. Is that right? As a Mustang, as an officer, as enlisted in the Navy at that time, right?
That's correct. I had that boss for 90 days, and then I got a new boss, and that's when everything went downhill.
Oh my God. So okay, what happened then?
Well, as I said, I believe the guy was a sociopath.
Yeah.
But we were installing a telephone switch that had been rescued from Mount Pinatubo, a 5 ESS telephone switch that we were putting into the base telephone office, upgrading all the phone lines, you know, fiber optic cables, et cetera, brand new building, everything pretty much built around this phone switch. And this captain, he was a commander. He was only one rank higher than I was. I was lieutenant commander at the time. And he started behaving in a very aggressive and unpredictable way towards me. And not just me, but other people. So one day I was giving a briefing at a meeting about the telephones situation, and he snapped at me in a very nasty and uncalled for way. And I didn't see it coming. I didn't know what his problem was. So I just let him rant for a little bit. And then when he was finished, I continued on with what I had to say. But I had seen how he was treating other people, and he seemed to enjoy being, harmful to people verbally. And I mean, I would watch the smirk on his face after he'd done it, you know, so there was something wrong with the guy, honestly. So about a week later, I had to go back to do another meeting, and I told my civilian counterpart, I said, Lee, I'm going to explain something to you. I said, if the captain starts in on me like he did last week about the telephones, and this is in a room full of all the senior leaders, I said, things are not going to go as they did last time. I'm just giving you a heads up. Don't be surprised at anything that happens or anything that I say. And he said, yes, sir, okay. So sure enough, I go in and I'm giving the captain some information about the phones, and he starts yelling at me just out of the blue. And he's just yelling about stuff that was beyond my control, and I had no control over. And so I waited for him to pause, and I said, why are you yelling at me? And that question surprised him because I'm sure he didn't get it very often. So he stopped for a minute and he looked at me and he didn't know what else to do. So he started yelling again. So I stopped him. I said, why are you yelling at me? But I didn't give him a chance to answer. I said, I have done nothing wrong here. I said, I'm giving you information. I said, I have done nothing wrong. I don't appreciate it. I don't deserve it. And I'm not going to put up with it. So by then he's completely clueless on what he should do next, because he was unjustified, and I called him on it, and everything I said was true. So he just sat there looking befuddled, and then the XO pipes up and says, well, you know, it's just these telephones. They've got everybody, you know, upset. And I said, XO, I said, the telephone is an inanimate object. Everyone here needs to realize that. I'm here to do my job, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, having embarrassed him that way, he made it his business to make my life as miserable as possible. And he did until about 7 months later, I finally had enough and filed a formal discrimination complaint against him. And that's when things got interesting. But I've been a team player. I had been a team player all my career. You don't go from a 17-year-old high school dropout to a top performing surface warfare guy without knowing how to be a team player. But it wasn't working for me there. And I finally had a showdown with him in the XO in his office. And I said, I want to know why I'm being treated this way. I said, I don't understand. It is not my performance. Something is causing you to treat me this way. I want to know what it is. And he looked at me. I'd gotten pretty worked up by then. I was upset. And he looked at me and he leaned back in his chair and he kind of twirled his pencil and he said, well, do you feel like a second-class citizen? And that's when the light bulb went off. I never brought up the subject of race, never mentioned race, never accused him of anything racial. But when he asked me that question, he was in a sense telling me, I'm treating you this way because you're Black and I can. Now that was my interpretation.
Yeah. And what was the process like for doing the formal complaint? Like, was it difficult for you to take that step? Were you worried about how that was going to affect your career moving forward? Absolutely.
I was worried about everything. I mean, you don't strike the king to wound. If you don't have a killing blow, then you're in deep trouble.
That's a great point.
So yeah, but I just had enough. I could not take any more of this mistreatment. It was really affecting my mental health. And what happened the day before or the week before that was he had tasked me to write a couple of point papers on the financing of the telephone operation for the base. We had 6,000 phone lines, multiple customers, commands, supervisors, shipbuilding, fleet training center, and everyone in between. And the comptroller had not done MOAs, memorandums of agreement with these subordinate commands. So some of them felt like they didn't have to pay their phone bill. And I had been pushing the comptroller to take care of that for about a year and a half, and he wouldn't do it. He was getting ready to retire, and then he started getting sick, but he wouldn't do his job. It should have been done years before that. So the captain ordered me to send out a letter to these various commands telling them that their phone service was going to be cut off for non-payment of telephone bills. And I said, Captain, that's the advice he got from his comptroller. I said, sir, you don't want to do that. I said, if you do this, you're going to kick over a hornet's nest. And if you do, everybody's going to get stung. I said, you don't have any piece of paper from headquarters, the type commander, saying that this is the course of action that you should take. So before I do that, I want something in writing saying that they agree with this course of action. Turns out he'd been lied to by his comptroller, and he said, we have to do 2 point papers addressing these issues that are outstanding. I said, well, great, that's fine. And I was prepared to leave. And he says, well, I want you to do them. I said, Captain, I said, I'm not a financial guy. I don't understand all this stuff. I don't have the background. I don't have any of the knowledge I need to do that. That's comptroller's job. He's responsible, make him do his job. He ordered me to do it. So I had to pull out all these supply technical manuals, supply administrative manuals, et cetera. And it was a very complex task, but I did it. And when I finished it, I forwarded them to the XO. He looked at them and forwarded them to the captain and said, these are great. Even I can understand these. So he said, let's go over to the captain and see what he says. So we get to the captain's office and he hands me this email that he's getting ready to send to his boss. And in that email, it says, what a great job that the executive officer had done using his vast Pentagon experience, distilling this complex financial information into these 2 succinct point papers that would finally clear up all this, turmoil regarding the phone system. Well, of course, the XO, all he did was proofread it and send it on to the captain. So I'm reading this and I'm getting angrier by the minute because he's been mistreating me. I've saved him twice, one incident that I hadn't discussed, and now he's giving someone else credit for the work that I did. So I handed it back to him. I said, Captain, I understand you're trying to get the XO promoted, and I don't mind that. I said, but I'd like to be included as part of the solution because I'm the one that actually did these point papers. Well, he snatched it out of my hand and he looked at me with a snarl and he said, well, in that case, they're unsat because they're more than one page. So at that point, I'm surprised that the little alien didn't jump out of my chest and start dispatching him, like in the Alien Predator movies. I wanted to grab him and throw him out the second story window. So he types up another email and it says, this should resolve the issue, et cetera, et cetera. Didn't give credit to anybody. So rather than give me partial credit for all of my work, he chose to give no one credit. So it looked like the comptroller had done the work.
Oh my God.
When in doubt.
That is the day I went back to my office. This was around 1700. And I sat down and I started typing. And when the sun came up the next morning, I was still typing. I was typing out my formal request for redress. And about a week later, we had the showdown that I talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. And just so happens that after I filed my complaint, 4 days later, Admiral Border committed suicide. Oh. And I decided after 10 days, they had taken no action on my complaint. So I decided I'd give him an olive branch. And I sent him an email, said, if you give me about 20 days basket leave in January, I will pull my complaint. I want to be out of here by the 1st of January, but my retirement date would be whatever it was. He readily agreed to that. I had no more problems out of him, but I knew when I filed that complaint, that was the end of my career. But I physically and emotionally and psychologically just could not take that abuse anymore. So I had to do something. It was either go to jail for a violent act against a superior commissioned officer or file a complaint.
The story, the conclusion of that story of ultimately the comptroller got the credit is just it made me laugh because it's the absolute epitome of passing the buck in the military. John, does this sound, how does this sound in comparison to your experience in the Navy? Did you ever have any issues like this with people you worked with? Were you ever a bystander to and I don't mean that in a passive way, but I mean, were you ever around to see some of this stuff happening or alongside your peers or in your chain of command?
I have to honestly say, not that I can recall a particular incident or a particular thing. I like you, Max. I kind of listened to Keith talk, and if you really want to punch in the gut, read his book. He really articulates here the personal side of it, but in his book, he goes into great detail about the individuals, and really kind of tells a story that it really opened up my eyes to maybe things that I just had been oblivious to, or perhaps not been exposed to. It's just not something. I remember the admiral that ran some of the inclusivity sessions for the Pentagon back during the last summer, giving a speech where he said, I drove my son to college in Richmond because I didn't want him to get pulled over by the police while he was driving to go to college last year. This is 2020. And I've been sitting there thinking, that it would never cross my mind that was something I had to worry about. And so he just sort of let that comment. That's how he opened up his discussion. And so it just really sort of emphasized to me how broad the abyss is between us and understanding what that really feels like. And so, reading his book was a big eye opener to me. And then I reviewed it in the Naval Institute blog, and got some interesting, got some good comments on that. And so I think, I look back over 30 years and really, it's almost embarrassing to think that either that went on and I was oblivious to it, or maybe, I wasn't there when it happened, or I just don't know. I just don't know that.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to the point of, this BEARD article. It would seem like a leap from what you just heard to talking about, a little goatee, right? But when you start to pick it apart, the I'd written this article about a beard growing contest that we did on a couple of my ships, right? And you might have done this before. You sell chits for MWRs, or people, the guys can grow a beard, the women can let the ponytail down. Usually you do it when you're kind of off station, so nobody can check, and then you collect $500-600 and have a party later. And so I had that story worked up, and that's when this article came out about the and I'll say it wrong, the pseudofacilis barbae, this affliction that is pretty well restricted to Black and I guess Hispanic men, and so that's when I got to dig into a little bit. Hey, what's that really mean? And so I worked that into the article as sort of I don't know, it's almost an afterthought. And then this study came out that we talked about before the broadcast started, where they did a study with the Air Force and found that there was an actual connection. People who had no shaving chits, which were primarily African American or Black men, ended up promoting behind their peers, which is bad enough. And then Keith points out that, well, if you are slow to promote at E4, that means you're slow to promote at E5, and then it just snowballs, right? And so here you have this this policy that's meant to sort of accommodate a group. But back to your initial comment about the bias, is it doesn't take much bias to mark someone above someone else in a fitness report, or give an award to one person vice another. And so it can all kind of add up. And then it can have this effect without anybody really thinking about it, at least consciously, which takes me back to my point is, the fact that I never thought about it makes me part of the problem, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's funny because it's like you read my mind, because I thought that there was a good transition here to talk about the PFB, the pseudofolliculitis barbae, which I just posted in the comment section here. And it's because, listening to Keith talk and then asking you that question, it made me start to think to myself how this stuff's invisible to so many of us. And then when it's not invisible with something like a no-shave chit, we look at people with a no-shave chit and the first thought is dirtbag. It's like unbelievable the way that we treat people. Subconsciously, you don't think about the pain and discomfort that people are in because of haircut and shave standards. You look at somebody with a no shave chit because you're kind of brainwashed into seeing this image of what a perfect sailor looks like. And if you go look at the manuals, it's not a Black man with a beard, right? It's a white guy, perfect shave, perfect hair, everything. And then when you see something that breaks that, it actually triggers something, a reaction that you've been trained to have from the time that you become an NCO to correct that or look down on that. And then I can think back, especially in boot camp. And Keith, I think you have a story from boot camp about guys who had PFB or shave bumps being forced to shave in boot camp, and it bleeding, and you can see how much it hurts. And with haircuts too, even with short shaved haircuts with like the shitty razors that they use in boot camp, having these masses of bumps and bleeding on their heads, and something that I could never understand. And then the balls to then look at someone like that with a no shave chit and say, unsat. It is insane. It's horrible. It's unthinkable. Now looking back on it, it's crazy. Keith, did you said you had something about this about the shave from boot camp?
Yes, I joined the Navy in 1975, so I went to boot camp in Orlando in March of '75. Hadn't been in boot camp very long. We were marching back from Chow and carrying our rifles, marching in formation. All of a sudden, my company commander, a senior chief machinist mate, called for the company to halt, and everyone's trying to figure out what for. And before I knew it, he was in my face, screaming at me and yelling. And about touching my worthless chin. And I realized that I'd reached up and touched my chin because I had a bunch of ingrown hairs there on my chin. So I just called the timeout and I handed him my rifle and I went to explain to him everything that was happening on my chin so that he'd be better enlightened. That's not what happened at all. He grabbed my cover and he pulled it down over my ears and chewed me out some more and said he would deal with me when we got back to the barracks. Fortunately for me, I didn't get in any more trouble because I think he recognized that there were 4 black guys in my company and we all had the same problem. A couple of them had it worse than I did, but it was very uncomfortable trying to shave over those bumps with the hairs grown in them, and you're just compounding the problem. Fast forward to 10 years later, I'm in ensign and officer candidate school. I wore a beard essentially from boot camp until the time I went to OCS, from 75 to 84, because the beard policy was still in place. And I normally kept my face fairly close shaved, but sometimes I'd let it get, half an inch or so, which was authorized. But when I went to OCS, I knew I was going to have to try to keep a clean face. So I'd shaved one day, and then I normally wouldn't shave every day because I couldn't do it. And I used a depilatory powder in between shavings because I couldn't use a razor every day. So I'd wait a couple of days and then use the powder. Well, I didn't have a lot of time between using the razor, and I couldn't use the razor again because my face was very inflamed. So I tried to use the depilatory powder, which takes a lot more time. And when I went to scrape the powder off my face, my skin was coming off with it. So I had these patches on both sides of my face and on my neck where I'd burned the skin off with this chemical. And it had seeped into my skin due to the already open spaces, sores from where I'd had the razor. So I went to sick call, and the dermatologist took one look at me and said, "No more shaving for you." So I basically walked around with scabs on my face for several weeks. And essentially, for most of my Navy career, I had either a small beard or a no-shave chin. Finally, in one of my seagoing department head tour jobs, I had a new department head call me in, or one of my new XO called me in and said, "You want to see my no-shave chit?" I said, "XO, my no-shave chit is expired. I can go get another one. They only give it to you for 90 days. I can leave the ship, go over and go to sick call and spend half a day over there to get them to give me a piece of paper that says my hair is going to continue to curl, or I can stay here and get this work done the cap wants me to do. It's your choice, but I'm going to have to do this every 90 days or so. I can keep it as low as I can, but that's the rules. That's what I have to do." He told me to get out of his office, and I just went back to work. So he had the choice to make. Do I lose half a day's work for one of my department heads, or do I accept the reality and let him go do his job?
It's funny. I keep my Blue Jackets manual next to me on the desk here when I'm working. And it's funny how, you're walking around a ship and there's people with this, and on an aircraft carrier with 6,000 people, you're walking around, you don't know the majority. You've never seen some of these people before in your life. Even if you spend a year on the boat with them, you'll see somebody for the first time who's been there as long as you have. And you'll be walking around and you'll see somebody with, a beard or whatever. And the NCO mind goes, I might have to ask this person if they have like a no-shave chit or something like that, let's say. And if that beard's in regs, like, are they keeping it in regulation in accordance with the no-shave chit stuff? If I don't do that, does that make me a bad petty officer? And if I do that, does that make me a bad human being? It's like this difficult situation. It's this difficult situation that you're in where the military is terrible at being empathetic and sympathetic and compassionate to people, especially their own team. It's like you were saying, you're one boss who you described as a sociopath. It sounds like you're 100% spot on. It encourages this kind of like ass chewing. It's an eval bullet. It's like, are you ensuring that, your people are within regs or whatever? And I remember even being taken to the Navy Exchange when I made E6. and our Master Chief making us stay at the exchange parking lot in San Diego until we corrected enough uniform infractions. And it was like, this is so dumb. I just kept thinking, this is so dumb. And the military never provides a better reason for the shave standards than it's one of two things. It's either because we said so or because your gas mask won't work if you have a beard. And the idea of the gas mask thing falls apart pretty quickly when you realize that, you know, we do have no shave chits on a ship, and I don't think anybody's ever had any major injuries because they couldn't use an SCBA because of a beard. And then the most forward deployed people, special forces, wear 6 month, 7 month long beards, or human intelligence people wear year-long beards to be more effective at their job. And they're most, in my opinion, most likely to encounter, CBRN attacks than the average person on a ship. And yet we look at somebody with, you can look at the thumbnail for this video, somebody with horrible, painful skin irritation, bumps, skin peeling off, story in the last year about black women who were doing this hair straightening, basically causing themselves chemical burns on their heads to be within uniform regulation. And any pushback on that is usually met with that person is not a good sailor or, soldier. It's really terrible. Do you see that progressing in a positive direction since you joined the Navy till now? It feels effectively like it's still the same that it's always been.
That would be a better question for John, because I've been out of the Navy for a long time. I know he's sort of focused in on that issue a little bit. I don't get very many calls from people or emails from people regarding that issue. I tend to discuss some other issues, but I can tell you one thing. I got a call just before I went to my shore duty. I got a call from the flag detailer wanting me to become an admiral's aide. They wanted to recruit me into the program. And I told them, I said, look, I can't shave every day. I said, I cannot present a squeaky clean appearance on my face every day. And I don't want to go work for someone that doesn't understand that and have that, fall apart on me. Admiral needs someone there that, if I went to work for the wrong guy, that could have been the kiss of death for me if I was deciding to stick around. They didn't give me any sorts of assurances that would not be an issue. So I just turned the program down. And they weren't calling me because I wasn't a good performer. They had reviewed my record, and someone said, we need to get this guy into the program. I didn't realize at the time that was an indication that maybe they were grooming me for something bigger, because I didn't have a real mentor or a sponsor that I could turn to and ask what I should do. So I turned that job down. And had I not turned that job down because of the beard issue, the hair issue, who knows where my career might have wound up. So sometimes we can lose very good people for such inconsequential things as, the way their hair curls into their skin.
That's a great point. That's an excellent point. It's, the Navy might describe that as an unintended loss of personnel, but it's really just a terrible way to look at humanity is what it actually is. Because somebody in the chat who was in the Navy and the Army in their time in the service said that he had to produce his no shave chit between the flight deck and the chow line 30 times during an average like lunch or dinner or breakfast period. So even if you are walking around with no shave chit, just trying to live your life without excruciating pain, and then you get a no shave chit, you're still getting harassed for it constantly. Were you getting that a lot? When you were younger, did you get bothered for your no shave chit a lot when you once you hit the fleet?
I didn't really, because I had some jobs that had me pretty close to the leadership in the command that I was in. And back in those days, as I said, beards were authorized. So I really didn't have much of a problem with that. Sometimes I would be clean shaven, especially when I got selected for OCS. I said, I'm going to have to figure out how to keep myself clean shaven every day. But once I got on board the 3 different ships I was on, it really wasn't an issue, except for when I had the occasional turnover and got a new boss, and they'd want to know why I was not clean shaven. And I would explain it to them, show them the chit, whatever. My performance was such that they really sort of gave me a pass. And I got to be, once you get department head and XO range, they don't really bother you that much.
Okay, that's
But
good.
I have seen many individuals.
Yeah.
I've seen many individuals with a two-tone face because they have bit the bullet and shaved to the point where they've got a much darker area on their face because of all the scar tissue. That's what my father's face looked like. I haven't seen Secretary Austin up close and personal, but just from the pictures I've seen, it looks like he may have had that same issue in his life as well. We joined the Navy at the same time. I joined the military in the same year, 1975.
Yeah, I've seen it many times personally, people getting stopped on just trying to walk from point A to point B, getting stopped to present their no-shave chit, which is a whole nother hassle. I mean, that alone, having to carry around, you know, a piece of paper on you in your pocket all the time because some random person who is not even in your direct chain of command, they just stop you, you know, in a stairwell and ask you to show your no-shave. It's total BS. Right. It's complete BS.
It's a form of harassment is what it is, because your supervisor should be the one making sure that you have the no-shave chit. If they have a question about what's going on with your face, they should go back to your chain of command and do it that way. But any random person, and the body language, the interactions that take place during those sorts of encounters make it very clear to you that the person that is questioning you does not think very highly of you as they're questioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Max, you know, just a couple points that Keith has brought up, but just to put a finer point on it, no pun intended.
Please.
It's a medical condition, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a medical condition. And I've had peers of mine, you know, my age group and sort of demographic say, well, it's a temporary condition. And, you know, hence the 90-day thing. But it's really only a temporary condition if you grow a beard. As soon as you shave, it comes back. And so, you know, I think, you know, Keith describes the ritual of shaving, and then the shaving sharpens the hair, which now grows deeper into your skin. And then as it grows, you have to literally kind of pull the hairs out of your face and comb it all the time, right? So again, this is a demographic, right? It's pretty narrow. That is subjected to both the physical pain and, as he talked about, the emotional pain. And I don't care who you are, the fifth time you pull out that shit, you start to feel like I would feel like a second-class citizen, you know?
Yeah.
And then the other piece of it is the answer you get sometimes, well, they can just go get laser hair removal, right? Like, just go get laser hair removal. One of my active duty friends described that process as somebody thumping your face with a rubber band continually for a half an hour. And if you look at the laser hair removal process, it takes a while. You have to get an appointment. You have to have it redone. It's not permanent. People think it's permanent, but it's not. It grows back in some places, and you also have skin discoloration. But even more importantly, it's a lifetime decision, right? So if I go in to have that done, I'm having that done. I'm never going to have a beard. You know, is that a big deal? Probably not. But I mean, it's not something we ask of everyone. We ask it of a small group. And so that's where I sort of went down the road of, hey, you know, this could be easily solved by changing the policy. Now, the policy did just change that allowed, because right now, the other piece of this is all those folks with no shave chits have scraggly beards because we're not allowed to make the beard look like a cleanly cut beard, right? And so out of some of these discussions, I'm sure with sailors, they said, hey, can we at least trim it up so it doesn't look so scraggly and people won't harass us about it? And so I think that's one of the changes in the recent NAD admin that is, you know, in a positive step. Ponytails, by the way, were allowed, I think, a couple years ago. Kind of a different issue there, but sort of along those lines. So I think the fact that it's a medical issue, the fact that it's a lifetime issue, and the fact that the choices are not very good when there's such an easy choice, which is just grow a beard. And so that's sort of what prompted me to write the article.
Yeah, your article is really good too. I'll have to add that into the description, the link to that in the description after this. It brings up a lot of good points, but it is crazy that we would then the ignorance some people would have. I'm sure at some points in my life I would probably be guilty of the same thing. I feel like I've become more aware of this stuff as I've gotten older, but you would just look at somebody and say, why don't you just go get laser hair removal? As if that's something that somebody would be excited to have to do or feel comfortable going to go do, or not have some kind of like, you know, this kind of, you know, it's insulting to someone's pride to suggest that they should just be quiet and go, get laser hair removal and stop complaining about their issue, coming from someone who has never in any way had to experience the same problem and just couldn't possibly understand the consequences and the path of going to go do that, and the second and third line consequences of that, that could affect that person, that sailor. And just the idea that it's kind of, and Keith, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you are getting called out for something like that, that's a medical condition, it probably is somewhat humiliating too, especially if it's happening publicly, like in a stairwell or something, somebody's yelling at you because if you shave, you get horrible razor bumps and if nobody's ever seen this, it's you can't not see that it's excruciating, and it probably affects your psyche too, having to walk around, because I have some dermatitis, and whenever it's like breaking out really bad, I feel like I don't want to go outside. I don't want to be seen that way, because it's not appealing to be seen with red irritated skin. And then the policy, and then for the longest time, for the whole time that you were dealing with it, Keith, the policy was, well, now you can have a beard, but if you want to try to make that beard look nice, well, no, we shut that down too. Like you can't do anything. It has to look just however it grows in. It's how it has to look. You can't make it look better. You can't, shape it, anything like that. The whole policy was ridiculous from the beginning. Did any of that make sense?
It made perfect sense. And the fact that you're not allowed to make it look nice, shape it up, is also a form of punishment, because
yes,
if you're willing to put up with some of the irritation by cutting your discomfort in half in order to appear, have a decent appearance. But no, you're either going to be all in or all out. So I think not enough time has been spent looking at, because I used a depilatory powder most of my career. I never used a razor unless I was forced to, because the razor always 100% of the time puts a sharp point on that hair. But the depilatory would soften the hair up and it just dissolved. You just scrape it off. So I would trim up under my neck and on my cheeks with that. And if I was forced to, because of some dignitary or something, to have to use a razor, I would do that and then go right back to the depilatory. But I liken it to having a bunch of fire ants on your face. If you ever had a fire ant bite and you get that pustule of pus right there next to the bump, and when that breaks, it's sore when you put water on it or whatever. Well, imagine putting shaving powder or some sort of depilatory powder into an open cut like that. And that's basically what you had to do every day. And the thing about the laser hair removal, that is primarily designed for thin hair, women's hair on their legs, light hair on their face. It isn't really designed for the coarse, thick hair that I've had Italian guys, I've had white guys with the same problem that I had, razor bumps. And it's really not designed for that coarse, thick hair. I imagine they'd have to use a higher power and have to do it more often. So it isn't a panacea. I mean, it may work, but it is very painful, and it is probably a very lengthy process, and it's permanent, as John said.
Yeah. Keith, and guys, just as a reminder, if you're listening in the chat, the link to the book is in the description. You can go get Keith's book and read it, and I think you should. What is it you talked about? Your dad was a bosun's mate, a hero in Korea and Vietnam, and so you joined the Navy, and you thought things were getting better in the Navy. What kept you in the Navy? What got you to stick around to the point that you did a career?
Well, part of it was wanting to prove my father wrong, and I have to correct something you said. My dad spent a lot of time at sea and time in Korea and tank battalion and paratrooper, but I would never describe him as a hero. My father had some issues. I think he had PTSD, to be honest with you. But he did the best he could as a father. And he was trying to protect me. It took me a while to figure out. He was trying to protect me from, what he experienced when he joined the Navy. And I'm not sure I remember what your question was exactly.
What was it? So I apologize.
What kept me in the Navy? Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the captain of my own ship. When I was a kid, they called me the professor because I'd sit around reading encyclopedias all the time. And I'd see John Paul Jones and, all of these naval heroes. And I wanted to be the guy up there saying, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. I wanted my own ship. So I wanted to prove my father wrong. And my goal was to have command of my own ship. So that's what kept me in the Navy. And I knew that the Navy needed more Black officers. When I joined the Navy, it was like 0.5% Black officers. When I got commissioned, it was 3.5%. And I wanted to be a role model for those people that were coming along behind me. I mean, I'm not sure I thought of this consciously, but everywhere I looked, I saw guys getting eaten alive that looked like me. I had the maintenance officer for my squadron told me, after I ran into him, told him I'd written a book. And he said, Keith, he said, we ate our young back then in the surface warfare Navy. And that was true. I know a guy who was driven out of the surface Navy. He's a lieutenant, went into the reserves, became a superstar in the reserves, retired as a rear admiral. But he had difficulty in the surface Navy because he'd grown up in a segregated neighborhood, went to a historically Black college, and then he was surrounded by all these white guys, aggressive white guys in the surface Navy, and he just didn't have the coping skills to deal with that. So in the right environment, he did exceptionally well, way better than I did. But I wanted to be a role model. I had many people stop me or give me, affirmations because they saw this Black officer that seemed to be doing well. And it was something that they used to look up to. I wanted the Navy to be better than it was.
Hey, Max, that's a great lead. And I was just calling up a post on LinkedIn, coming full circle here. It reads like this: when I joined the Navy, it was rare to see one Black officer in command at sea. As I took command of Desron 50 on 29 July 2021, there were 4 major commanders and 105 commanders at the same time. And so, their pictures are in here, 4 Black men and 1 Black woman. And so pretty amazing how far things have come.
I made a comment on that particular post as well.
Oh, okay.
I'm
shocked. I can't believe it.
For all the listeners out there, I just want you guys to, I always want to remind you to make sure you have your LinkedIn account set up and you're leveraging that free LinkedIn premium for veterans and all that, because it's an incredible place to be networking and learning and meeting people. It's amazing that you and so many others, Keith, joining the military, continuing to serve in the military, PFB is just one more thing that made your military service more difficult than many other people's. And there are a lot of things, obviously, that we talked about with racism and chain of command and bias and, just the fact, like the shock to the system, maybe not for you because you might have been expecting it or had, seen it many times, of having one interaction with somebody via email and detailer and orders, and then when somebody meets you in person, to see them change their tone over you just being African-American is, it's insane. And we wanted to emphasize on this discussion that PFB was and these other kind of biases that were created by uniform regulations, whether that was on purpose or not, they certainly trickled down into the point where it became effectively harassing people based on race, because these were medical conditions that were specific to people's races, and how that negatively impacted people's careers. And I hope that everyone listening understands what individuals are going through, who then, Keith, and I'll just use the word again describing you, heroically continue to honorably serve the United States of America even after enduring all this crap that gets thrown at you. And if nothing else, that alone is a heroic thing to do. And for you to then say that you did it because you want to inspire others, I hope that you feel like you've done so. I can tell you for sure, just looking at the audience of the show here, that you've done that today. So I hope that is, in some way, a positive feedback from this discussion. But is there anything that you wanted to let everyone know here that we haven't gotten to today, or that is just a really important thing you wanted to pass on?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts and to listen to what you guys have to say. And to, if nothing else, I hope I've given people a reason to look beyond what they see right in front of them and look and see what are the underlying issues that I may not be aware of here that are impacting this person's career. And why am I reacting the way I am if I see a person with a less than a clean shaven face? What is it that has caused me to react the way that I am? And what is it that I don't know about this situation that I should educate myself about?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. John, is there anything that you wanted to get to as we kind of get to where we'll start thinking about closing up our closing thoughts here?
No, thanks, Max. It's been great to have this discussion, and always insightful talking to Keith. And another colleague, again through a friend of a friend, retired Fleet Master Chief, wrote back about the article and had a quote in there that I've adopted as my email tag. It basically says, "For change to happen, the unimpacted must show empathy," or something like that. And so, will the Navy let out a beard policy? I don't know. I mean, probably not. But I think it's worth discussing, and I hope that as more people become educated as to the medical side of things and the personal side of it, that maybe in the balance, when you look at the SEALs out there on the front lines with the beard, I don't look at them and say, "Wow, that guy's unprofessional," or a dirtbag, right? So, maybe we'll get there eventually. And you know what? In college, you're allowed to grow beards, and hardly anybody does. It's not like everyone in the Navy is going to sprout whiskers.
Yeah.
When it becomes once you, if it were to become policy again, and it was for decades, right? And somehow we survived. It'll be a non-issue, but it will be a non-issue for everyone. And instead of only being an issue for a very small minority. And so that to me, that's kind of the point of this, of bringing this up and continue to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that this is the meaningful conversation that needs to be had about changing uniform regulations to be more, people would say more inclusive, but just, instead of more inclusive, less biased and negatively impactful to people's careers, because it's actually hurting people. And I feel like when people talk about beards in the military, it's the, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this term, but it's like the bro vets, the people who are like, "I served, I'm awesome, I'm totally one of the bro community." It's like kind of like basically being like a douchebag. And we needed beards because it's like stupid that we can't have them, and we would look cooler, and Sweden has beards, and these meaningless points. So much of it is meaningless. And not even, it's meaningless, and it's not thoughtful, and it's never going to change anybody's mind. But a discussion like this might. And who knows, the future CNO could be listening to this podcast, and those kind of changes will happen over time. And I think if you look day to day, you don't see any change. But if you look 30 years, hopefully you see something positive. I don't even know anymore. But I hope that you would see something positive. So somebody in the chat says, "I am definitely going to send this book to my son-in-law who is an E5 in Yokosuka, Japan." And I think that's awesome, from Harry in the chat. One quick question for you, Keith. Somebody in the chat was asking if you knew Mel Patel, one of an old mineman. Do you know that? Do you recognize that name, Mel Patel?
That name doesn't ring a bell with me. I left the mine force in 1977. So I only served 2 years in the mine force, and I was in Commander Mobile Mine Assembly Group in Charleston, and then I did a detachment to Ciudadela, Sicily, and I did another one to Glen Douglas, Scotland, and then I got out of there and went to Cuba for 2 years, where I was a mast yeoman for 2 years. So my time in the mine force was short, and I was happy for that.
I don't even think that rate's still around anymore.
No, they're still around.
There's
only about 800 or 900 of them in the whole Navy. Yeah.
Oh wow,
it's always been a very small rate.
Wow.
Yeah, they're still there. Yep.
Wow. And one other question, maybe you could leave us with some wisdom here, and I'll give you guys a chance to say any final thoughts, is when faced with these leadership barriers, like you were describing, the times that you've been experienced discrimination and harassment from leadership, and just felt like you were getting a raw deal there. If somebody was experiencing that today, would you have any advice for them on how to proceed?
Now, that's a very tough question, because I've been calling out the Navy, because when I wrote my book, the annual defense report, which included the discrimination complaint statistics, were online and available. And I also got some statistics from Department of Defense about discrimination complaints. Shortly after my book came out, and I tell people in the book, you can go look and see for yourself how likely you are to succeed if you file a complaint. And shortly after my book came out, all of that disappeared. A couple of years ago, I submitted a new request for updated statistics. The Air Force gave me 350 pages and the Navy gave me nothing. So I would tell people that you have to try to eliminate all the reasons that you think you may be treating the way that you are. Do not assume it's discrimination. It may be something else. But when you strip away everything else and someone looks at you and says, do you feel like a second-class citizen? You can be reasonably sure that race has something to do with it. So my advice to people is to try to deal with these issues one-on-one, directly. Let people know what you will and will not put up with. If you're wrong, then you need to change your behavior. But if you're doing everything you can that's right, and someone still will not treat you right, you have to make a decision. But I can tell you that trying to trust the system as it exists right now, there's very little accountability. I had a run-in with a Navy doctor. I'm 64 years old, and I was talked to in a very disrespectful and demeaning manner, and he'd made a mistake that he tried to cover up by blaming me. So I wound up filing 3 separate complaints all the way to TRICARE, a grievance. I got zero satisfaction out of that until I filed my TRICARE grievance. And then I got a letter that was backdated 12 or 13 days saying that I had done nothing wrong and that they had screwed up. So once you start down this road, is it a difficult path? But if you have no other option, understand that it will negatively impact you in one way or another. But you should not have to be psychologically and verbally and mentally abused to serve your country. The leadership needs to step up and recognize that if we have racism and discrimination, that ought to be reflected in the numbers somewhere. But you can't find that when you look at, if someone files a discrimination complaint, the likelihood that it is going to be substantiated is less than 10% for all the services. So either people don't know they're being discriminated against, or the people that are doing the evaluation can't see it.
You know, I don't know if you're tracking on this, but first of all, that was great. I actually hit the save button twice there to grab a couple of the clips from what you just said. Just so you know, I covered a story on my show out of the Pentagon where they had actively suppressed EO complaint numbers at the Pentagon level for years from all the branches. And by the time that they published those reports to someone like a media outlet, they would be completely different from the actual reports of, IGs, command climate investigations, all that stuff. So you're right on. I don't even know if you know about that, but and I'll try to forward you some of the info on that from one of the other episodes I did. But you're right. You're spot on. You're exactly right. So, do you guys have anything you want to say before we wrap up here to the audience, to the listeners? Everyone has been inspired by this conversation, and a lot of people have expressed that they are excited to read your book, Keith. So I'm excited to get some feedback on that. And if there's anything you guys want to say to leave us with.
The only thing I'd like to say is, if you like the book, leave a review on Amazon and let other people know what it is that you found informative or interesting in the book. And if you don't like the book, just forget I said anything.
I've got the image of the book pulled up on the screen right now, and the link's in the description, so make sure you guys go check that out. And that was great. I love that. And then, John, do you have anything?
No, I just like to say thanks for the opportunity, and I always learn something every time I talk to Keith, and I really appreciate it. The only thing I would add to what he said is to that person who asked that question is, is build your network and seek out mentors, and so that you're not fighting something by yourself, because your reputation will precede you. And I do think things have changed some, and I do think there's opportunities there. But I think that group of 100 people you talked about in the beginning, Max, I would say that we all have, if you find 2 people without any biases, you'll probably find out that you missed something in those 2 people. So
that's a good point.
The sooner we can have some education and recognize that and show some empathy for each other, the better. But thanks a lot. Great conversation.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. You're welcome on to come talk to me anytime. I'm honored to have had you here. So we are all we are all lucky to have heard this conversation today, and to now know Keith and his hopefully get our hands on his book and learn from it. And to everyone out there listening, I appreciate you guys very much for being here. It is always a pleasure to have a guest on, and the audience supporting, kind of just sitting back and listening to the conversation is very special. It means a lot to me. I'm sure it means a lot to John and Keith. So thank you guys for that. As always, all the info you need is down in the description of this video, including the bios on John and Keith and a link to the book as well. Go check that out. Let me know if you do. I'd love to hear about it. Love to see it. Instagram tag when you guys get the book and all that would be fantastic. I would love to have you both back on the show. John, that would make your 3rd time. And Keith, I hope this is just the start of a conversation that you and I can have together. And with all that being said, I will talk to everyone out there tomorrow. Normal Scuttlebutt show time and place. And until then, for now, that's the Scuttlebutt.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.